From Radio DePaul, Chicago's college connection.
My father spent 3 years restoring this car. It is his love. It is his passion.
I'm Michael Cera, and human skin is my passion.
I learned to feel things I'd never felt before. Love, jealousy, passion for disemboweling.
Look at all the passion on that wall.
Well, jazz flute has always been a small passion of mine.
It's a bathroom.
It's not just a bathroom, David, it's a passion project.
My passion project. Destroying someone else's passion project.
This is Passion Project with your host, Peyton Baisden.
That sounds about right. What up, y'all? How's it hanging? Welcome back to Passion Project. I'm just looking at my watch right now. I was about to call it a clock. It also is a clock. I was looking at the watch on my wrist, and it's about that time. That's what I was thinking. Welcome back to Passion Project. We've got an excellent episode for y'all. And how about we get it started? That's what I was thinking.
Me too.
So, because we have a new episode this week, that means we have a new guest, and that person is sitting across from me. I guess more so next to me, also across.
Tangent.
Yeah, near me. Who are you?
Well, thank you for asking.
Yes.
My name is Hunter. I'm a recent graduate of the University of Illinois, and really a huge radio show enthusiast. Well, that is not my passion today. I'm so happy to be here.
It's great to have you. For those listening, those watching, those around, how would you best describe yourself in 10 words or less?
Wow, 10 words or less. I've been called the funniest man alive, and the king of ice maintenance, which I think is really what we're about to talk about.
That's so true. And also 10 words. The reason I wanted to have you on the show is I heard tell of the king of ice maintenance, and
it gets around.
Yeah, and I sort of really wanted to have somebody that not only important on the show, but you don't become the king of something by not caring about it.
It's true. And recently I actually was not the king, but I recently won an award at the University of Illinois, Best Ice Maintenance Person. And before that, I don't think I was qualified at all to talk about this.
Wow.
But now I can mix passion with expertise.
That's very beautiful. Why don't we start there? How does one win such an award?
Well, it was I'd like to be transparent here. It was a superlative award. So it was voted on by my peers and not my professional staff.
I see.
So I think a big part of winning that award was actually just being popular at the ice arena. But as we'll get into, a big part of ice maintenance is being very personable.
Oh,
so
interesting. I don't think many people would consider that. Let's break it down. How would you describe ice maintenance?
Absolutely. When you go ice skating, this is the type of ice maintenance we're talking about, by the way.
Yes.
On a rink, ice skating in general. When you're at the rink and you're skating around on these really sharp blades, they dig into the ice, and the ice gets all beat up and destroyed, and it's a bad scene. And if there wasn't ice maintenance, an ice rink would operate for a week before it would have to go under.
So the broad umbrella, ice maintenance, is upkeep of the rink.
Yes.
What were specifically your responsibilities that earned you this prestigious award?
So my official title was Zamboni driver, which, if you haven't been to an ice rink, is the giant machine that drives around.
Yes.
Sometimes it goes at the speed of a walking person, but it drives around, and it picks up all the ice and it resurfaces and it lays it all down, and that's what my job title was.
All right, intriguing. Let's talk Zamboni, because it is a vehicle that
it is a machine.
Yeah, not many are familiar with, but I found that most of modern America is sort of infatuated or mesmerized by the Zamboni, because it's so similar yet so different to things we see in our everyday life. So
yeah, exactly.
What is a Zamboni? How? Why?
Great question. And if you think modern day America is obsessed with it, don't go to Canada. they actually drive those around the streets out in Canada. But it's a four-wheel machine, four-wheel drive. which is essential because ice is very slippery.
Right.
The wheels are studded. But it's a machine that was invented by Frank J. Zamboni in the 1940s.
Is that real?
That's his real name.
That's
it's
awesome.
Frank J. Zamboni. He founded the company. That is him. He is unfortunately no longer with us, but he left a legacy. So Zamboni is actually a generic brand. People say, hey, that's a Zamboni, when it may not actually be. But it's
Interesting.
It's transcended just brand. It is.
It is
a
Kleenex.
Zamboni.
It is
exactly.
Q-tip.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It is a Band-Aid. It's
Right.
a generic brand. But it was founded in the 40s, and originally it was just a little mechanical cart that you pushed around, and it laid water behind it. And the water it worked. It resurfaced the ice. But the problem is if you keep doing that over and over and over again, the ice is going to get thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker. And something about ice rinks is they are frozen from underneath. So the ice on the top is going to be a hotter temperature than the ice at the bottom.
Right.
So if the ice is too thick, the top is eventually just going to start melting. It's not going to be able to stay frozen. So Frank J. Zamboni saw this in the first iteration and realized we have to change this. So they're incorporated a ice pickup feature. So the Zamboni both picks up ice and lays down ice. And if the Zamboni operator is good, the amount that you pick up and the amount that you put down should be exactly the same.
Interesting. So there's a level of skill to how much you pick up and let down. It isn't necessarily very automated, or what's the finesse involved?
Right now, it's not very automated. With the way technology is going, I think it most certainly will be automated soon. New Zambonis actually have a little iPad built in, and you can click things and play Angry Birds on there.
That's fantastic.
But right now, it is all human skill. It is all, do you know what you're doing?
Interesting. Okay, so it's got studded wheels, but doesn't slip and slide around. And it simultaneously picks up ice and lays it down. How does that process work?
Sure. So there's a lot going on. Frank J. Zamboni, he has several patents for it. He doesn't want you to know how it works, but if you look at it, it's pretty simple. There's this thing called the conditioner that lays down on the back, and that's where all the magic happens. It's about $100,000 piece of equipment. A Zamboni itself is $130,000, and about $100,000 of that is the little tiny black box on the bottom that does all the magic. But it has a giant blade on it, and the operator can lower or raise the blade however they want to dig in or dig up from the ice. And then there's augers that push the snow in once you pick it up, and another auger that pushes it up, and it goes into the giant tank in the front. Many people think that the Zamboni has a giant engine in there. It's not true. It's completely hollow, and that just fills up with snow.
And then where does that snow go eventually?
That snow eventually, every rink's a little bit different. The one that I worked at, you pulled into the Zamboni garage, and you lift the tank, and the snow comes out, and it falls into an endless pit.
Oh,
it's a little scary.
Oh no.
It's the kind of pit that you look down and you're like, I don't like standing too close to this. But some rinks, the Zamboni actually drives outside and they just dump it on the lawn. It really depends on what they do. Or more modern rinks will actually dump it back into the water supply and they'll recirculate it. Because the other thing a Zamboni does is not only does it pick up snow, it has to lay down snow.
Right.
So if you want to go out and say, hey, I want to do a cut, I want to take the Zamboni out for a spin. If you don't fill it up with water beforehand, you're not going to do much.
Right.
So you got to fill it up with water. And it takes, I believe, like 3,500 gallons.
To do one round?
It's 3,500 pounds. It's like 300 gallons.
And that's just one.
That's just one cut.
One resurface.
Yes.
Wow. Okay. You mentioned beforehand that there are moves to electrical, like Zambonis.
Yes.
What's like the make or the fuel?
Back when they were originally invented, they were gas powered. And when, I don't know how much you know about combustion engines, but when you have an indoor enclosure and you're running a combustion engine constantly, there's a big carbon monoxide problem. And they figured that out pretty quickly when I think somebody may have even died from carbon monoxide poisoning from the Zamboni ice resurfacer. So they very quickly realized, hey, we have to make this clean for people. So now the two big ones are either propane powered or electrical powered. The ones that I drove are all electrical.
Okay. Does the art or I guess the practice of Zamboning, does that change in an indoor or outdoor rink? Are there certain challenges or?
To my knowledge, no. I've only ever driven on an indoor rink, so I'm not 100% sure. I would imagine outdoor would be a little bit more challenging if it's actively participating on the ice, precipitating.
Oh, yes.
On the ice. But other than that, I don't think there's much difference. But I
Okay.
don't know. I'm not the leading expert there.
You primarily do indoor work.
I'm more of an indoor guy.
Okay. So, what is the frequency of which somebody should resurface the ice? Does that depend on what's going on?
Sure. So back in the day when it was first invented, it was only done like once or twice a day because it took like an hour or two to do,
Mm-hmm.
and it pumped the whole thing full of carbon monoxide, and you had to
Right.
vent it, and some places did. But now it takes about 15 minutes. So you can really do it after any sort of event on the ice. Got a
Mhm.
hockey practice, you Zamboni. Got a figure skating practice, you Zamboni. Broom ball, Zamboni.
Right. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. To me it sounds like, oh, you resurface the ice, it's new and fresh. Is there anything beyond that to ice maintenance? Because it feels like
There is a lot to it besides just the Zamboni.
Mhm.
The Zamboni will do a big part of the work for you,
Mhm.
but there's still a lot more to be done. The Zamboni has one big fatal flaw, and that's when you're going around the corners, you have to go slower, or else you're going to crash into the boards and possibly kill someone.
Right.
And when you're going around the corner slowly, you're still dumping water. So you're actually going to dump more water around the corners than you will when you're going straight.
Mm-hmm.
And over time, that builds up. And in order to effectively, that makes the rink like a giant bowl.
Okay.
Where the middle is a lot lower than the rest of the corners. So you have to find some way, how do we remedy this?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the edger came into play.
Okay. The edger. Tell me what type of machine or thing or describe edging to me.
Sure, I'd love to describe edging to you. So you take, it's like a lawnmower, but for the ice.
Okay.
You wheel it out there. It's got you push it on out. Really heavy machine.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably 120, 130 pounds. And you push it out onto the ice. And all it is a giant blade on the bottom, like a lawnmower. And it just spins and just cuts the ice. So
Ooh.
if you leave it in one place, it'll bore a hole straight through the ice, which is really bad. But what you do is you push it along. And something about the edger is it has a lot of torque on it.
Mm-hmm.
When you're pushing it, it will yank you. And you have to make sure that you are holding it still, or else the edger will go out of control, and then
Okay.
the ice will need several days of maintenance.
How often? So I've seen a few hockey games. I've been to a few casual ice skating events in my time, and I've never seen somebody edge at one of those. So how often should you edge?
You should edge a lot.
Okay.
It's good for the ice, but the problem is it takes a while because
Okay.
it's a guy walking around just
Mhm.
doing his own little thing, and it's not particularly engaging. On a Zamboni, I mean, children love it, adults love it. You can really engage, but when you're on the ice edging, it's not as engaging to the people. So you often do it when the arena's basically empty. You do it when you're closing.
Okay. And when you edge, do you edge around the whole thing, or is it just in those specific areas that are harder to reach?
You do the corners a lot. You'll edge the corners a lot. Edging the sides, you would do maybe once or twice. You don't have to edge the sides too much. And then another big place to edge is actually the Zamboni doors. As the Zamboni's
Oh.
pulling on and off, water builds up there as well. So you got to make sure you edge the Zamboni doors really well.
Okay. And is there any sort of like guide to that? How do you know you've like flattened it out, I guess? Or how do you know you've gone down
That-
far enough?
That's not really. It's by feel. It's
Right.
an ideal ice thickness is like anywhere from about 3/4 of an inch to 1.5 inches, somewhere
Okay.
in that neighborhood. I don't know what that is in metric. I apologize for our overseas listeners. But anything you want to try and get it to that level. And the really good Zamboni drivers can actually just look straight down at the ice and be like, oh, yep, that's an inch thick. Or look
Oh,
down and be
wow.
like, ooh, that's a little thicker. I'm not quite there yet, but I know a guy that is, and
Mm.
it's insane.
I guess another question I've always had about ice rinks, The markings on the rink, how are those displayed or maintained?
So this brings up a good opportunity. How do you actually build an ice rink?
Right.
Because there's a lot to go on there.
Mm-hmm.
And you start with a giant concrete pad.
Okay, just
And
a big
then-
concrete.
Just a big concrete pad.
Mm-hmm.
And then you lay down a little bit of sand, and then you put down kind of like a pool liner, like something that's in a pool, and it's usually white on the background. That's why an ice rink is usually white, because ice is see-through. If you ever have it in your glass, like, you can see right through ice.
Right.
But when you look at an ice rink, it's like, why is this white? Ice isn't white. You're actually just seeing right through it, and it's a white thing, white tarp on the bottom.
Got it.
And then you paint that tarp with all of the different things. And sometimes it's paint, sometimes you actually lay down strips. It depends. And then to actually make the ice rink it takes several months, because you lay down the water one tiny layer at a time. You do a whole layer, you let it freeze, another whole layer, and then let it freeze, and then another whole layer, and let it freeze. And this makes sure that there's no like imperfections in it. If you dumped all the water immediately and then froze it, it would not freeze properly, and you would ice skate on it, and it would immediately crack, and you would fall over, and you would break all the ice. So you have to freeze it super tiny layer by super tiny layer. I would like to personally confess I've never done that before, but I've heard that it is an awful process.
Have you encountered any disastrous like ice maintenance experiences? Like, what's the most damage you've seen done to the ice, or perhaps one of the harder tasks you've had to complete?
So the rink that I worked at University of Illinois, we have a strict no food or beverage policy on the ice. And most people think like, oh, that makes sense.
Right.
But the reason is because it's disastrous for the ice if anything falls on there. Specifically, we had somebody come in with a coffee cup. They set it on the boards and then skated around, and a little kid came and crashed into the boards, and the coffee fell on the ice.
Was this hot coffee?
And this was hot coffee.
Oh.
And it melted a hole straight through. It has a hole that you could fit a softball into, which is not good.
So how does one repair a hole in the ice like that?
You don't. As I said, when you make the ice, it's a really long process to make sure that it's actually secure. But to repair it in like the meantime, you actually take slush and you just put it in the hole and pack it down and hope and pray that nobody else goes over it. We usually put a cone over it. And then if you run over it a few times with the Zamboni, it'll put a small layer of ice on top of it. And then you just hope and pray that somebody doesn't hit it hard enough that they go through that small layer of ice into the slush. That's why most ice rinks, when they're closed over the summer, will drain it and then redo the ice again, because there's going to be a lot of those imperfections that build up over time.
And those could prove hazardous.
They could very much prove hazardous. And in fact, that coffee stain is still there. You can still see the coffee spread out underneath the ice at the ice arena that I worked at.
That's unfortunate.
It's not good.
What other sort of things should you look out for or could be harmful for the ice?
A big one is figure skaters.
Tell me more.
Very talented people. I'm jealous of their skills. But they love to take off and land with those pesky toe picks.
Oh.
And depending on how seasoned they are, they'll dig their toe pick in and do a spin, or they'll start braking with the toe pick, or they'll jump and then land directly on the they'll make all these crazy holes that are just an absolute pain to get rid of. But I would still put figure skaters at number 2 as the most disastrous people for the ice arena. And number 1 are children.
Oh.
Children they're very curious.
Right.
So they'll take their skate and just start digging a hole. They'll just keep going and going and going until they reach the bottom. And if that actually that's never happened when I've been there, but if that actually happens, you have to close the rink for like 2 or 3 months because you have to resurface everything. Yeah, because it's too unsafe. When you fill it with slush, it's too big of a spot and somebody could get hurt. So you have to redo the whole ice.
Now, do the skates cut right through like into the slush?
As long as you're going at a decent speed over it, you won't. But figure skaters that have the toe pick at the front, and when they jump or when they break or when they're children and they're digging into the ice, they shove the toe pick straight into the ice almost like a hammer. And if you do that over and over again, you'll start to chip up the ice.
Okay.
It's not solid.
Could you take a second to speak on the significance of skate sharpening and
Sure.
and how, I guess, as maybe it's a more passive form of ice maintenance.
It is a passive form of ice maintenance. If you have improperly sharpened skates, they could be doing damage to the ice as you skate to them, and it's also a safety hazard. I've seen many people fall because they just didn't sharpen their skates properly. And as a Zamboni driver, part of my job was actually sharpening skates as well, which is a very tedious process. I'm personally not a big fan of it. Usually when I was at work, I kind of tried to find an excuse whenever possible to not sharpen skates. So I'm not going to say I'm a seasoned expert at it, but I definitely tried to stay away from it. But when you actually do it, it's two giant grindstones, and you just stick the skate into the grindstone and take off a thin layer of metal, and it makes the skate perfectly smooth and sharp. And many people think that ice skates, they come to one point at the bottom, and you skate on that one point. But that's actually not true. And an ice skate is a concave. It's like an upside-down U. There's actually two edges. There's an outside and there's an inside edge. So when you're sharpening, you're actually taking out a little groove along the middle and making a U-shaped sharpen in there. And that's essential, both to have an even cut on the ice and so you don't slip and fall.
How sharp do they get?
So a good figure skate is sharpened at about half an inch. That's what it's called. It's not actually a half an inch cut. That would be so severe, but that's what they call it. And then a hockey skate is at 3/4. So figure skates actually dig a lot more into the ice because they have to lean really far and do these crazy tricks and destroy the ice. Hockey skaters, theirs are a lot less sharp because they do a lot of braking and a lot of sliding, a lot of evasive maneuvers where they need to move omnidirectionally. So they don't want their skates to be as sharp.
Okay. Before we're getting close to the end of our time. Any tips you'd want to give somebody for who's trying to open their own ice rink or already owns one and is trying to maintain it? What are some important things?
Sure. In terms of opening your own ice rink, my best advice is start with about $2 or $3 million. They're super expensive and very borderline profitable. I don't really understand how a lot of them stay in business. The one that I worked at, the University of Illinois one, stays open by university subsidizing it. As far as a private business, I don't know how a lot of them stay open. So I would recommend maybe staying away from it unless you are an angel investor or just have money to burn. But if you actually have a rink and you want to get going and make sure you know maintenance, the biggest thing that I've noticed with Zamboni drivers is they know the moves. They know, like, hey, I'm supposed to lower the blade here. I know I'm supposed to turn on the water here. I know I'm supposed to turn here. But they just do it without thinking about it. And they don't understand what the machine's actually doing and what they're actually doing to the ice. And as a result, a lot of the people at the University of Illinois are student drivers. And as a result, by the end of the year, you can actually feel the Zamboni going up and down a little bit of people just going through the motions but not realizing that they're carving little ditches everywhere.
Wow.
So they have to understand what's actually happening. And I would hope that somebody who opens an ice arena, I wouldn't have to tell them that. I
Right.
would tell them, don't open an ice arena. But, yeah.
Lastly, any word of advice for aspiring Zamboni drivers?
Yes. Don't start right away by getting on the Zamboni and saying, hey, let's try this out. At my rink, 2 different Zamboni drivers ripped a hose out of the wall. One of them put a hole in the boards along the edge. And one of them took that $100,000 conditioner and tried to Zamboni the floor outside the ice.
Oh.
A lot of very expensive mistakes. So don't start on the Zamboni right away. Start by watching YouTube videos, learn how the Zamboni works, work 3 or 4 years at the Frank Zamboni Co., and then come back and figure out and actually get on the Zamboni and understand. Now that you have an understanding of what's going on. You might make some mistakes, but they won't be $100,000 mistakes.
Right.
They'll be like $50 mistakes, that type of thing. Actually, nothing at the ice arena costs $50, but everything's
It's
so
a good
expensive.
investment.
It is not. It is a good investment as long as you're not affiliated with me.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time and your wisdom. I
you.
feel much more learned and much readier to take on the world of ice
resurfacing,
Yeah, resurfacing, ice practice,
resurfacing, maintenance, everything.
maintenance, all of it. I'm gonna skate to it.
Oh,
You know, as
that
they
was a good
say.
one.
Thank you so much for being a guest today. Fantastic time. Any last words?
I'd like to say Happy Mother's Day to all the mothers
That's
mothers that are listening.
As of right now, it is Mother's Day. So
Yes.
shout out.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. I hope you have a fantastic week. And I want you all to stay passionate. Catch you on the flip.